This is a critical juncture for Africa for many reasons. It's a critical juncture because there are many things that are written about Africa. We are the object of research, we are the object of knowledge, of technological, scientific, and other experimentation. Yet we continue to imbibe, to drink of knowledge generated by others about ourselves. This is a critical juncture for Africa because I think many of us have come to realize that the salvation does not lie in politics, although the chains that hold us back from our progress is often political. This is a moment that the continent must find in itself a people and a leadership that sees their responsibility not as in pleasing the former imperial masters or pleasing any outside world, but a people that will realize that nobody owes Africa a meal, nobody owes us a living. We should invest in our own institutions, invest in our own ideas, and begin to believe in our own ideas. This thing that started many years ago with colonization and colonialism, that no place is worth knowing until a white man or white woman has been there, must stop. Our people reference books written by our own people once they have been referenced by Europeans and Americans. Our people reference places and beauty once it's been dubbed beautiful by others. So it seems to me that the biggest challenge we have is a challenge to redeem a thought. This thought is this, that Africans are knowers. We are not just doers. Africans are thinkers. We are not just actors. We reflect on things, that our wisdom is knowledge. We don't need anyone to affirm it as such. If there is any leadership that's to be studied, it is the leadership offered by African women who, even through the difficulties of slavery, of colonialism, and of dictatorship, have persevered and resisted the temptation to give up on the continent. And the future of this continent lies in honoring that genius, in studying it and in celebrating it. The experiments we made with liberal democracy, where we continued trying to fix elections, we continued trying to fix institutions that were modeled around Western institutions, where we were told that our problem was that we were dissimilar to the West, that the best way to develop was to be similar to the Americans or similar to the British and the French, where we ourselves began to fight Anglophone, Francophone, and all those other phonies that were not really, have nothing to do with our indigenous identity, have nothing to do with who we are. Only a small section of the African population speaks English or French. The very fact that we stopped celebrating our own languages, our own cuisine, our own fashion, shows that not only had colonialism done harm in keeping us under chains that were institutional, but colonialism had managed to convince us of our own inferiority. But thank God, there is a young generation of Africans who have begun to believe without restraint, because they have no other experience, that it is possible to create things that are usable at a global level. And technology has given them a fighting chance. But technology is an instrument, it's a tool. The ethics that we were taught from our values and as Africans, the humanity that we were taught as Africans, is much bigger. Often people like to talk about African conflict, but only a small fraction out of 55 countries are in conflict. They will talk about genocide in Rwanda. They will talk about the carnage we're seeing in South Sudan and Central African Republic, or what we saw elsewhere, wars that were caused often by outsiders, as though that is the sum total of the continent. If we were to judge Europe or to judge any continent by the wars in only 10% of the entire continent, which continent would escape harsh judgment as hopeless, as needing help and salvation? If we were to judge the entire set of other continents on the basis of the poorest people that they choose to ignore, the poor people sleeping under bridges in America, those laid redundant when factories close, Which continent would escape this? It is about time Africans realize, yes, we have challenges, we have problems. We must fix them, no one else will fix them. We have leadership that needs to be fixed, institutions that need to be reoriented to serve our people based on the realities of the local context. We have universities and places of manufacturing or producing ideas and knowledge that produce a knowledge that is totally relevant to the reality of our people. Knowledge that is meant to serve former imperial centers, the Western world and elsewhere. But once we start investing in those institutions to reorient them to produce knowledge that serves Africa and relevant to Africa. But there is something about our people, about being African. It is in our music, it is in our poetry, it is in our point work, it is in our dance. It is in our everyday common practice of greeting each other on the streets because none is a stranger. It is in this recognition, the smile on the face of the poorest person, because poverty is not a condemnation to lacking joy. This ability to harness strength even where we live in the midst of great weakness is the thing that will make this continent great. We must observe that only those who don't understand our history, how we migrated from the north, how we migrated from the east, will seek to kill other Africans and treat them as foreigners in their own bodies. Our histories are shared. They are shared not because we look alike. They are shared because we came from the same stream. So xenophobia or Afrophobia, which is the hatred of self, does not reflect genius. We cannot excuse it on the basis of social inequity and misery or the failure of governments and political elites. I think it's about time Africans asked, what does it mean to be an African? Why is it important to be an African? It does not matter, as I have traveled through the world, that I come from this country or that country. When I arrive on the shores of Europe, the skin that I wear is a uniform that makes them admit me or treat me with suspicion. When I arrive in Asia, the skin that I wear does not make them distinguish which country I come from. I am African. And because I'm African, I'm treated the same way. So these false distinctions we make, this need for affirmation from everybody else, is the thing that keeps us as slaves to the politics of difference, how we turn our identities into weapons of hate to kill one another. There is an opportunity when we think about our countries to think beyond the thieves that run governments, to think beyond the murderers that run politics, to think beyond the callous, thieving, shameless people that run our companies, but to think about the everyday man and woman, the men and women who struggle to free themselves from unjust corporate power, to free themselves from the bullying that you see online through cybercrime, to free themselves from political elites who collude with companies in order to steal futures of even unborn children, to put all of us in debt, such that an unborn young African in almost any country now owes in excess of $50,000. Because those who live in excess today live without caring about the environment, they live without caring about the public goods and the commons. So, my message to every African is always this: our problems are similar. The causes of our problems similar. We may reduce it to the local politician, but the local politician has global linkages. That local politician now has access to technology to do surveillance, to oppress, to suppress. That local population is now linked to militaries, is now linked to money, is now linked to. And when we imagine freedom in this age, it is important for us to imagine it as a fight of forces of progress in Africa against forces of injustice, forces that may be intellectual forces that want to reinforce racist notions about Africa, forces against cultural forces that continue to want to turn everything African or construe everything African as inferior and as wicked. There may be religious forces that wish to tell our people not to take care of the earth that God has put them in, to be responsible stewards, but to always live in such a spooky spiritual world where they are of no earthly use. It may be against economic forces that tell us there is only one way of development. Allow wealth to concentrate in the hands of a few so that it can trickle to the majority. No, wealth does not trickle, it concentrates. Those who are outside the concentration zones of wealth have a moral obligation thrust upon them by history and common sense to fight against the exclusion. I hope every African understands you don't get included through courtesy. There's no revolution that's ever transacted through courteousness. We have to fight to make our world more equal. We have to fight to make our world more inclusive. May Africa and Africans reshape their destiny without looking to any other continent to save us, because the rest of the world is in crisis. Be it America, be it Europe. We're seeing politics of hate, politics of unpleasantness, politics that is anti the very essence of humanity. Here in Africa, we have experienced decades of autocracy, of unpleasant politics, but we have entered the age where our humanity has become bigger in our consideration of who should govern and who should rule, who should lead. I enjoin every African, think African, act African. This is our continent. This is our obligation to liberate ourselves, for ourselves, and for the future.
As Africans, we shouldn't find it exciting that African countries can fight amongst themselves with ease, especially fighting around territorial expansion. Africa is one country, it's not even a continent. These borders we are seeing and we experience in our continent were imposed on us by the imperialists. No African border should derive pleasure out of killing other African people. We say this because we are advocating for one Africa, with one currency, with one legislation, with one military, and with one president, because we believe that these small countries are the ones that make international communities undermine Africa. Africans are hated everywhere in the world. Why should we treat each other like that ourselves? We are for Africans, and Africans everywhere must always find African solution to their problems without any external interference. Africa, wake up. Africa, rise up. Africa without borders. Africa, continental free trade area. The time is now. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.